I can really grow a mini brain in a dish, which is something that we call in the lab an organoid. And they're not really the big size of the human brain. They are small blobs of cells or aggregates of cells. An organoid is like a mini organ, so that's why we call it an organoid. And this is like revolutionized how we study the human brain, because you have now access to that, period or developmental period that you really could not study before.
My guest this week is Rana Fetit. Rana has a degree in pharmacy and biotechnology from the German University in Cairo. She has a master's in molecular biosciences from Heidelberg University, and she has a PhD in translational neurosciences at the University of Edinburgh. And that is where she currently works as a researcher, looking at lots of different parts of the brain and degenerative diseases. Rana, welcome to STEM with Mr. N.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. And it's a real pleasure to have you on the channel doing this interview today.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Can we just start off with, what is neuroscience?
So neuroscience is basically the study of the brain, the study of the human brain. What is it made up of? The different kinds of cells that are in the brain, how they talk together, and how are these, different parts kind of connected together, is how the different types of cells interact. And it makes us who we are. Our brains makes us who we are. And so it's the study of a lot of these things, basically going from the very small cells to the bigger part of the brain, and then even to our feelings and emotions and everything that makes us who we are, really.
And I'd mentioned in the introduction that your research is involving degenerative diseases, but that was, I know, a very simplistic way of saying what you do. So could you give us a bit more detail about what your current research involves?
So I work with stem cells, and stem cells are great. They're special kinds of cells that you can use them to create or to make any different kind of cell type. So for instance, I study brains. So I start with a stem cell and I grow from these stem cells any brain cells that I'm interested in. And we have learned a lot from, different models like chicks and worms and a lot of, different organisms, how our brain develops. So we know a lot of working with stem cells is really like cooking. You have like a recipe and you know what to add to those cells to kind of push them to become a certain type of cells that you're interested in. So I use stem cells to study the human brain, to study the different kinds of cells, and to study how these cells interact together and what really happens in diseases and what goes wrong, with the hope that we can identify a certain cell type that we can use for therapy.
And what sort of diseases are you researching potential stem cell cures for?
So I have worked on kind of a spectrum of diseases. I did my PhD on neurodevelopment and basically how the brain grows, and a lot of conditions like autism, schizophrenia. And I used that toolkit that I learned to now go more into the neurodegenerative side of things and what really happens at aging, what happens in conditions like multiple sclerosis, where basically our nerves think of them as like wires, and they've got an insulation, and that insulation that protects them is not produced by those nerves, but really produced by other cell types that take care of those nerves. So what I'm studying is what really happens in those conditions where that wiring, that insulation comes off, and that nerve is no longer healthy and cannot really survive, and eventually it dies, and that's how people develop disabilities. So what I'm trying to understand is really see what is happening there, and how can these cells protect those nerves better, so that we can actually understand what's going on in conditions like dementia, conditions like multiple sclerosis.
And I know from research I've done for different things. So like I made a video before called The Brain and It's 10 Things You Should Know About It. And I know that the brain's notoriously been quite a hard thing to study over the years, because you can't study it, obviously. Well, for a long time, you couldn't study it in a live person. So how has advancement in technology also been able to advance neuroscientific research?
So that takes me back actually to the idea of stem cells. So we couldn't really understand those earlier stages of brain development because, like you said, you don't really have access to those time points. So with stem cells, because they can really become anything, so you can really drive them to grow into those earlier stages and understand how the brain grows. But so there are different kinds of stem cells, but the one that I'm really interested in is called induced pluripotent stem cells, and I know it's a mouthful, but it's basically the way we make those stem cells is that, let's say I want to study your brain, so you come to the clinic and I just take a blood sample or a skin swab, and in the lab I really know which genes to switch on or which genes to switch off, so that I can brainwash that cell, so it's no longer a skin cell, and I just push it back to that earlier stages where it can be anything I want it to be. And then from then on, once I have that stem cell, I can, push it to become one specific cell type. But what I can even do is not just grow one specific cell type to study. I can really grow a mini brain in a dish, which is something that we call in the lab an organoid. And they're not really the big size of the human brain. They are small blobs of cells or aggregates of cells. An organoid is like a mini organ, so that's why we call it an organoid. And this is like revolutionized how we study the human brain, because you have now access to that, period or developmental period that you really could not study before. And from then you could even like push those organoids to become a specific part of your brain. You can fuse them together to see how the different parts talk together. And there has been like a lot of, work done with organoids recently into rare disorders, rare diseases. And all you need is to just find one person who has that condition and get those cells, because they were carried his or her or their genetic background and genetic identity. So that has helped us really to access and understand those conditions better. I mean, some some labs have even like sent those organoids to space, to see how the effect of space, what happens in space on our brain development. You can use it to study evolution. Get monkey cells, make monkey brains, get human cells, human brains, and then compare the two. What really makes our brains different, and so on and so forth. And it's also like very useful to understand, to use it for like to test drugs basically before giving them to patients. You can use them, test those drugs of the organoids, and then that would kind of eliminate the side effects, etc. So yeah, so they have really advanced our understanding of the human brain, because now you have a human model to understand the human brain.
I think that's quite incredible, and it also removes some of the ethical dilemmas historically of having to obviously cut open animals to study their brains. And one of the other things I find fascinating about neuroscience is it's the brain trying to understand itself,
Yeah.
um, which I find really quite funny. I'm going to digress slightly from the neuroscience, but we are going to look back to it, because I'd said in the introduction that you also have qualifications in pharmacy and biotechnology and in molecular biosciences. Now, I've interviewed somebody who was a pharmacist before, so we're not going to touch on that bit specifically. But can you explain a bit about what biotechnology is and what molecular biosciences are?
So biotechnology has a lot to do with the studying. Well, first studying of the cells, studying of the organisms, and so you can study how our human cells work on a molecular level. So what is inside the cell that really makes it do its function, really, and most of the cells in our body would have the same basic organelles or little parts that would do the same function. So basically, with biotechnology, you're really understanding that cell biology. You're understanding how you can use other cells of other organisms, like bacteria, like viruses, to actually use that for like tools in medicine, like vaccines. And how can you use the bacteria to modify the genes and the DNA, so that it would help you to use it as a tool, basically, in the lab. So a lot of the things that we do in the lab involves modifying DNA and changing certain sequences. And we use bacteria to do that as a bioreactor, as an organism, to make more of what we want to do. So a lot of biotechnology has to do with that. And interesting, a lot of biotechnology also has to do with computing and programming and learning, software and understanding how to use that to in your research and incorporating that into your research. So that was the biotechnology side of things. Moving on to, so when I moved to Germany, I wanted like my undergrad degree in Egypt was largely pharmacy based, and I realized toward like halfway through that I don't really want to do pharmacy. I want to do the research, and that's what really excites me and interests me. So I was looking for a program that kind of gives me many tools to learn them hands on, so that then I could build on these skills and choose like where I want to go with these tools. And that's what I did. So molecular biosciences really teaches you a lot of different skills, a lot of different tools based on that cell biology background that you understand and you know. So it has a lot of, so at least the program that I went to had a bit of, lectures and seminars, but a lot of the tools, like the technical tools that you use in the lab that you can use to investigate and answer certain questions. And that ranges from, virology to cell biology to using different kinds of cells or even microorganisms, etc.
And why did you decide to make the jump from studying in the molecular biology over to doing neuroscience?
So that's a funny twist of events. So in my program, it was a very broad program, like I said. So you get to do a little bit about virology, a little bit of cancer biology, a little bit of neuroscience. So we have like kind of a broad basis, and then towards the end, you get to choose to do an internship, whether in Germany or abroad. I found an internship in Edinburgh, and I came to Edinburgh for like 3 months, and I was working in the what was before now the IGMM, the Institute for Genetics and Molecular Medicine. And I was working on organoids, and I was working on like stem cells, etc. And I just realized that, I really enjoy studying the human brain. And for a long time, I was kind of between those two fields, neuroscience and cancer biology. And I really enjoyed the two. So I did my PhD in translational neuroscience, and I really enjoyed it, really loved it. And then I did a short postdoc after I finished my PhD in cancer, but like in cancer biosciences, and I just realized that I really like neuroscience. So that was kind of where, okay, this is what I want to do. This is where I want to be, and I really want to spend my time understanding, the human brain.
And I think that's great that you've taken that journey, because it shows even somebody who was in an established field like yourself doesn't mean you need to stick in that field. You can still diversify and try different things. And obviously, you've now found your passion in neuroscience.
Yeah.
And that's a nice linking note to actually go way back in your past to where your interest in STEM came from.
So basically, I was, as a child, I used to ask lots of questions, and I used to like bug my parents and my family and teachers with like about everything really around me. And more often than not, I did not get very satisfying answers. So I would end up like looking into things my own, reading on my own, just like doing my own research on my own. But I did not know that I wanted to be in STEM until later on when I did that jump. From I went into pharmacy and biotech, and I did not enjoy it. So I then realized, okay, let's go into research, because that fulfills that passion, and it gives you that platform to investigate, to do errors, and you correct them, and it's something that your research, you begin with a research question, but it's really evolves based on the answers that you have, and it changes. And I like that that dynamic. It's something that grows with you, and it changes your understanding based on the evidence. And that just basically I built that into not only into my career, but even into like my lifestyle, so to say. So I think I was just like so in like enjoying that whole scientific process and scientific method, that is just something that slowly kind of rubs off onto your lifestyle, that you start like using that skill to just like question everything and think about everything and doubt and find answers, and go into that loop of things. So I would say it was when I first did my internship abroad in research that I realized, wow, I have no idea what I'm doing, but this is what I want to be doing.
And I think it's great that it's actually just come from that natural curiosity that I think we all have as children. And it just depends what happens with that, where people's roots tend to go.
Definitely.
And you've obviously worked in a couple of the different scientific fields, but they've all been biological sciences. So
Hmm.
from past interviewees and my own research, I've heard that women are very well represented generally in biological sciences. But I have not had the chance to speak to somebody about whether that's the same with women from an ethnic minority group within the biological sciences, as well as Muslim women within the biological sciences. Are you able to shed some light on what the representation is like?
That is a very good question, actually. So I have clearly like lived in different places and have seen different the way different settings and different structure different places are run, and I would say that yes, there are a lot of women at at the earlier stages, but very few of them actually make it to the higher stages. And there are a lot of challenges that are faced, that women in general face during like as they progress in their career. And that could be a lot of things. That could be just like the burden of having a family, the burden of having that with your career, the lack of support, the lack of recruiters considering all of these external factors, or just dismissing those external factors and responsibilities. But like you said, it is, I do come from like in a minority, and you don't see a lot of people who look like me, and this is something that I find like I'm very passionate about, that whole equality, diversity and inclusion, because I think it's very important to represent different people and to represent different backgrounds. And it's even very important for the younger generation to just see that, oh, I can be someone like that too. I can be, it's not just for a certain group of people. Like every science is for everyone. And I do a lot of public engagement with schools, and with children groups, especially like Muslim children groups as well. And we talk about science, and we talk about the brain during Brain Awareness Week. And I find it just like very inspiring to see how the kids, their eyes, they light up, and the little girls, they say, oh, there are, because I mean, coming from my background, there are lots of complexities about, gender stereotypes and what women can do and what women cannot do. So even like that, for a woman to be in science, that's already hard. But added the extra, burden and the extra limitations that people put for themselves about what a woman can and cannot do, it makes it even twice as hard for someone from my background to go into the field and to actually prove to everyone that no, you can actually do that, and you can actually become, and in a way, I mean, in a way it makes me try, like I always try to be the best version of myself, because when you come from an ethnic minority, a lot of people just look at you and think that you're just one of them, and they label you in a box, which is unfortunately kind of is not true. So what I always try to do with every new place that I go is to just like talk to people and be an open person, so that I would invite conversations like this, and about every topic. Like I always tell my friends, like nothing is censored. I'm happy to talk about everything and anything. Like that's the beauty of traveling to different to different places, learning about different people and different cultures, and throughout my journey, I have benefited from that, this different opportunity to actually go, and it helped me grow as well as a person, and to reflect on my identity, and what does it mean to be an Arab, and what does it mean to be a Muslim, and how do I and what kind of what do I add to the society, being the person I am, etc. So yeah, I have learned a lot. It's helped me to grow a lot, and it's helped me reflect a lot, and it's always something I would tell people who are thinking about, science and thinking about going into science, like embrace the diversity of the different places that you go, because science is really based on that fluidity of different people and different backgrounds and different schools of thought, because that's where, you get the different idea. That's where, that sparks the conversations. And leap for that opportunity, because throughout my journey I ended up like speaking 5 languages, and I ended up living in so many different places, and my path went and had different twists and turns, but I really enjoyed every minute of it, because it kind of all adds up to who you are as a person in the end.
And I think it's great there that you'd said about embrace the diversity of where you go, because that's one of the things that I always say about STEM, and it's part of the reason why I started doing these interviews was to show the diversity of careers, but also the diversity of people. And even with people that look the same, no one's had the same journey into STEM. So there's just diversity at every single level that you go down that route. And I think it's great then that you're also out here as a public face showing some of that diversity. Um, did you have anybody as you were growing up that I know you said it can be sometimes hard to find somebody that looks like you? Was there anybody that you had that you kind of looked up to or was your guide towards where you wanted to go?
So I remember growing up, I had two amazing teachers at school. One of them was my English teacher, and one of them was my Arabic teacher. And both of them, what I really loved about them was that how they kind of taught us how to think, and that was a very important skill to have, and not just, not just learn something imperative to pass an exam. That's not the whole point of education. That's not the whole point of learning. What's really important is using the evidence and the things that you see and the things that you understand, and to try and build, to train your mind to think for yourself. And that applies not just, for school, not just for science. It applies for your personal, your independent investigation of the truth. Like, what do you seek in life? And I think it's just they really influenced like my view on the world. Maybe back then I was just like a young, teenager, and I did not really see the impact of that happening. But looking back and, on my life and the people I've met, those two people really were just like focused on raising us as an individual, like thinking about what makes you you, and what makes, and how can you be a good part of this community, regardless of which community you are. But you need to be someone who is proactive, someone who is who adds to society, someone who helps and benefits the people around them. And that's how you grow and your community grows. And I think that was very important for me. But the other thing I think, and because you were talking about role models, etc., someone who really influenced me, and that was it's a bit distant, but as a child, I just liked reading in general. So I would just get random books and read about. And and one of the really the books that I really liked was Richard Feynman's script, the book, the physicist. And I also like, what I really enjoyed about reading his books was just like, again, it's this idea that there aren't, like, you should not, the boundaries are in your head. You're putting boundaries for yourself. So regardless of what people are going to say, regardless of what, what box people are going to put you in, just go ahead and do the right thing. Go for, follow the evidence, follow the signs, and just, be out there doing the best that you can. And I think that was another thing that influenced my, my upbringing in general.
And there's something else that you mentioned in one of your answers there that I want to touch on and see how it actually links to how you think in STEM. Because obviously in STEM, you have to constantly come across challenges and things keep changing, whether that's updating technology that you need to get used to. But in one of your answers, you had also said that you have learned 5 languages as you've traveled around as
Yeah.
well. And I imagine as somebody who only speaks one language fluently and little bits of other languages, that actually must come with its own challenges and barriers. So in my mind, I see a link there between a thinking process with learning languages and STEM. Is that something that you would agree with? And also, can you tell us what 5 languages it is you do speak?
So I speak Arabic, English, German, French, and Spanish. Well, it's the reason I started learning a lot of languages along the way was, first, I like to, again, I want to break the barriers between people. I want to break the barriers of stereotypes. So if I go to somewhere, where I clearly look different, I want people to feel comfortable, speaking to me in their own tongue. And I also like reading, the literature, reading, the the narrative, and it's, without it being lost in translation, is very important, because it just has a different soul to it when you read it in their own language and its own, tongue. So for me, that was just very important to establish that connection with people, so that, so that I can, bond with people better. And, as a neuroscientist, I think that's good for my brain as well, just to train your brain, your nerves to fire to make new connections, to fire more. And just like I do it as a part of, being healthy in general. But also, it is challenging when you're trying. There are days when, my brain doesn't work, and everything just like, all the words, pop up at the same time, and I was like, I can't speak today. But it is a way about like disciplining yourself, because if you don't use a language, you forget it, right? So what I do is, and that people might think I'm crazy, but I divide my week into different days. So like Monday is my German language, so I listen to German music, I read German books, I listen to the radio in German, listen to German songs, and you kind of surround your brain with the language that you want to speak, and that kind of builds on it. And I do that with, like, Tuesday is my French, Wednesday is my Spanish, etc. And I found that very, very helpful, in a way that it keeps the language fresh, and it kind of trains your mind, so you flex that muscle, basically. So yeah, it is challenging, but I think it's all about you putting yourself out there, disciplining yourself to actually, people, when you start learning a language, you're always going to make mistakes, and it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay. No one is going to say, oh, like, or people, sometimes a lot of people, like, are in their own heads, and they think like, oh, people are going to think I'm stupid, I can't speak the language. And actually, more often than not, people are very happy to see that you're trying, you're going that extra mile to speak a different language, and people appreciate that. So it's definitely something that I would recommend. Learn as many languages as you can, because then you can speak to the world.
And I think that's actually great, not just for learning a language, but that's just great for life in general, is just try things, because people aren't going to think you're stupid when you try anything. They'll see that you're trying. Like the pupils in my class, I always say to them, it doesn't matter if you get it wrong. What matters is you actually tried,
Yeah,
because you can't help people that aren't trying. And so
exactly.
I think that's a great actual link, not just from learning languages, but to normal life. So
Hmm.
we're almost out of time, Rana. So what I want to do is, and you've given lots of different wee bits of advice in there, for people, but I just want to finish with, are there any bits of final advice that you would give to anybody out there that's perhaps interested in STEM but not quite sure what to do or where they can go with it?
Well, I would say if you're interested in STEM, do a lot of internships. Try everything based on literally what you were saying. Just try something new, try something different. Summer breaks are very long. Just go out there, put yourself in a different, situation, different place, different environment, and try it for a couple of months, or even like a few weeks, and see how you feel about that. And that would help you to build really a stronger decision about how to where to go. And I think the biggest thing is that a lot of people think that, oh, once you're committed to a certain path, you can't, change your mind. And that's not true. You can always change your mind. There are so many, different ways out there that you can engage with STEM. And it doesn't have to just be research or just be a certain, way. So explore. And I think that would be the advice for anyone, really. Just explore your opportunities. um, don't feel constrained, and don't abide to the pressure to conform. Because it can be very hard to try and do something different, or something that the people, or your little, community or circle of people who surrounding you might, think that's different, or that's not for you. But really, just follow the calling, and just do something different, and do not really just do things because you've been told to do so.